All right, so this is the bandsaw. One of the things that you need to realize with the bandsaw is that there's parts that you have to recognize, okay? And really quick, as we start, this is the upper wheel guard. This is the table. This is the lower wheel guard. This is the on and off switch. And then down here below, this is the stand. Okay, I'm going to get closer as we move forward. This whole area right here is called the arm, okay, because it supports the top wheel, the bottom wheel. This is the arm. All right. So what I'm going to do is go up high here so you can see this a little bit better. Okay. So this bandsaw has a continuous blade that runs all the way around both the top and the bottom wheel. And you can see that it moves, right? Now, if this was to break, let's say it's closed, the blade breaks, hopefully, most of the time when that happens, you won't get hurt. Just be really careful and be really aware. Do not open these until you come and get me or call me, and then I'll take care of changing the blade, getting a new blade. Don't open them. Now, I want you to understand something. Hold on a second. When these blades break, and they do break, because of the tension and because somebody is not using it correctly, putting too much stress on the blade as they're trying to cut around a corner, they break. It's no big deal. Please do not walk away from the machine and be worried about that you broke the blade. In fact, the best practice would be to turn the machine off. If the blade breaks, hit the off button. Okay, then either call for me or come and get me, and I'll take care of changing the blade. They break all the time. You're not in trouble. In a sense, you didn't do anything wrong. Maybe it was your technique, or sometimes the blade just break because of the amount of tension that's on the blade continuously, and the weld that holds together gets brittle and then comes apart. So don't worry about breaking the blades. It does happen. They're used by a lot of people, so they will break. Now, one of the main things that I want you to understand, and I want to reiterate, is this. The number one rule on the bandsaw is what? Somebody put it in the chat. What is the number one rule when it comes to operating power tools? First person puts it in the chat gets 20 points. Here, let me move this down. See, I didn't hear anything, so. Oh, there it is. Don't look away. All right, Emmanuel Lopez, good job. Never, ever look away when this is running. You don't want to do that. Okay, you never want to look away. That's the number one rule in our shop. When you're operating power tools, you never, ever want to look away. Okay, so I want to show you some things on this machine. Now, if I was going to change this blade, I would have to get it loose so that I can take the blade off. So I want to show you how to do that. So hold on one second. I'm going to move this around best I can. So we're looking at this other machine right here. And this is the back of the machine that we were just on. The first thing that you want to do if you're going to remove the blade, or if the blade is, you're going to put on a new blade, is you have to release this lever, which is the tension, right? You'll see it as I bring it down. It puts tension on the blade. So you want to release the tension. This knob right here, when it's down, the tension bar is down. This is the tension knob. What that does is put a certain amount of tension, and there's all kinds of ways that You can measure that, but that's what that's for. This knob right here is for the tilt, and I'll explain the tilt once we go back to the next, to the other machine. This knob right here is the lock knob for the adjustment, the guide adjustment. So I'm going to take this off, and once I turn this, this bar starts to move up. What that does is this. It moves this right here up and gives you distance here. And we'll talk about that when we go to the next machine. But what I wanted to show you is the tension bar, the tension adjustment knob, the tilt knob, the guard adjustment knob, or the guard lock knob, and the guard adjustment knob, which is right there. Remember, it moves the guard up and down. All right, so those 4 things that we're looking at. I'm going to move to the next machine. Hold on. Okay, so I'm going to go a little higher so you guys can see it. So hold on 1 second. All right. So you see the blade right now. It's running not in the center of the wheel, but back just a little bit. Okay, and you want to make that adjustment with the tilt adjustment knob that's at the back of the machine that you just saw. So right now, it's running back there. Now I'm going to make an adjustment, and you can see the wheels coming forward, and now the blade comes forward. That's the tilt that tilts this wheel forwards or backwards so that you can adjust where the blade runs or travels. So right now I'm going to tighten it, and you can see that the blade starts to run back, right? And that's about where you want it, just off the center. You don't want it on the center of the wheel, you want it just off the center. Okay. Now if I was going to change the blade, then there'd be a process. Unlock the tension bar, this wheel comes down, the blade comes off. I have to take this plate off. Can you see it? No, let's see. Right there. So this plate comes off. This little knob on here comes off. And then I can pull the blade all the way out and change the blade. Then I have to put the tension lock back on, put enough tension on it. Then before I turn it on, I want to check that it's running true like I just did, right, with my hand. Make sure that it's not going to come off. Then I can go ahead and shut the upper wheel, the lower wheel. Okay. Now, right here, these 2 things right here are the blade guides. Okay, right there. They guide the blade so that it stays as straight as possible, and this wheel here keeps it from going back all the way. Okay. Now there's a couple things I want to talk about this once we start cutting, but these are the blade guides. These 3 things here. Okay. Now I'm going to go underneath it. Let's see. Not quite. Go behind that thing there. So hold on 1 second. There we go. So you have the upper wheel guides. Now you have the lower wheel guides down here. So if they need to be adjusted, let me know and I will do that. Upper wheel guides, lower wheel guides. These 2 things here adjust the tilt on the table. So this table actually swings and tilts so you can make an angle cut. Okay? All right, back up. Okay, it's very important that when you're cutting a piece of material that you stay outside this circle and never straight in line with the blade. Outside the circle, so your hands should always be outside. Your hand should never be in front. Because again, if you get distracted and your hand goes into the blade, this blade will cut you, not like the scroll saw. Okay, this blade will get you. So you want to make sure that you stay focused, you never look away, and your hands don't get anywhere inside this circle while the blade is running for any reason. All right? Okay, I'm going to make a couple cuts on the machine so you can see them. Hold on. Get the picture right. There you go. Okay, one thing that's very important, if you can see this, my finger barely fits underneath this wheel. So if you wanted to make that adjustment, you never want to cut with blade being exposed. You never want to cut without your material being on the table. Okay? Blade cannot be exposed more than 1/4 of an inch, and this has to be on the table, sitting flat on the table. You never want to try to cut with it being up away from the table, always down on the table. So make the adjustment. While it's not running, I can barely squeeze my finger underneath there. I'm going to lock it down so it doesn't move. Okay? When I start my cut, I don't want the material up against that blade because it'll grab it and all kinds of things will happen. So I don't want that. What I want to do is, if I'm cutting this line here, okay, I'm going to use both hands when I start. So I'm going to start the machine, guide the saw in there. Then when I get to a point, I'm going to put my hand behind, slow down at the end, make that cut. Now, you want to wait till the blade at least slows down, and don't reach in here with your fingers at all. I can reach in here with a scrap piece of wood or my pencil and move that out of the way, but I never want to reach in there when the blade is moving with my fingers. I want to stay away from that as much as possible. Okay, the next thing I want to show you what's called relief cuts. So let's just say that I was going to cut this piece of wood. Okay, it's pretty tight. I probably could do it. It takes a little practice to get used to it. But for you, if you're going to cut something like this, I want you to do what's called relief cuts. And it's simple. You just make some random cuts along your board to allow those pieces to fall out. Okay, and I'll show you what that's like. So the first thing I'm going to do is just make a cut around here to get some of that material off. Now I'm going to make my relief cut. Okay. Now you can see that this has got some really bad ridges in there. And guess what? That's what we use the oscillating sander and the belt sander for, mainly the oscillating sander because of how tight this is. You can get all that sanded out. So when you do this, you want to stay away from your line as best as possible. Then you can come back and sand it out. All right, so the next thing is this. If I was making this cut and then this cut, I need to get this out. So if I'm cutting in here, I don't want to get to that point and then pull out. I want to make sure that I turn the saw off and pull out when the blade has come to a complete stop. And I'll show you that really quick. I want to wait till the blade comes to complete stop before I pull this back. And here's why, because it can get caught in there, especially with not plywood but regular lumber, because lumber has a tendency to pinch back on itself. And then as I'm trying to pull out, I'm pulling the blade forward. And that would cause the blade to come off the wheels, and then I've got the blade off the wheels, so now I got to make that adjustment. So in the PowerPoint, it says, don't back out of a cut more than 2 inches. This is a little bit more than 2 inches, so I don't want to do that. Now, I could always back out after I turn it off and the blade comes to complete stop. Then I can back out of that cut. Again, one more time. You don't want to reach in there while the blade is going. Wait till it comes to a complete stop before you reach in there and move whatever material you're cutting. Okay? All right. Let me make an adjustment. I'm going to turn this around. Hold on 1 second. Okay. So this is the same. It's a bandsaw, but as you can tell, that blade is a lot thicker. And especially on that type of blade, hold on, let me get this right. Especially on that type of blade, because of how wide it is, you want to make relief cuts. Because if you start to put too much tension on the blade twists, and then it starts to whine, and the more tension you put on it, the more possibilities that that blade will break. So if you're using this wider blade, this wider bandsaw, you're not going to be able to make as good of turns. Now I'm going to make some turns on the other saw in a second so you guys can see that. Hold on. This is it. Doing what I want it to do because it's all twisted up. All right, so here we go. All right. So now I'm going to make a curved cut, but I'm not going to use relief cuts. And I want to show you what happens. Let's see. go. There we go. Okay, now with this blade, I can make this tight of a circle, but if you notice, you see that those dark marks right there? That's where the blade, those dark marks inside there, that's where the blade is putting a lot of tension as it goes around that circle. So it comes with practice, feeling it with your hands and being able to see what that blade is doing to get that tight of a circle. Now, I would say that most of you would only be able to do that type of a circle, like maybe a 50-cent piece or a 25-cent piece. This is smaller than a dime, so it's a lot harder to get. So you have to be really careful and slow to make that thing turn around that circle, all right? Most of the time you're going to do relief cuts. When you start, when you're a beginner, you can get to this point, and then when you have a lot of experience on the saw, you can get to this point. Okay? So, number one rule on the bandsaw is never look away. Also, don't ever do anything that you're not sure of. If something in your head tells you, hey, that I'm not sure about doing that, then by all means, come and get me. Tell me what you want to do, and then if I feel like I can do it safely, we'll attempt it. If I feel like it can't be done, then we're going to find another way to do it. Maybe on another machine, maybe with some hand tools. It all depends. But don't experiment with what you're doing. Please ask my advice before you do it, because you don't want to get into trouble. You don't want to get to the point where you get yourself hurt on this saw, okay? Because it will injure you, and that injury is not going to be minor. It's going to be severe. So you don't want to use this saw if you're unsure. So if there's something in your head that tells you that maybe you shouldn't be doing what you're doing, by all means, listen to that. Listen to that, come and get me, and we'll go over it. We'll make sure that you stay safe and you don't get injured in the shop. All right.